All right, we are live and ready to go. Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are coming in from. My name is Dylan. I am the content marketer here at SparkLoop. This is one of our office hours sessions that we put on. I'm joined here with my friend and creator whiz, Jay Clouse. Actually, creator professor, scientist. I don't know what you want to go by.
You almost said creator wizard, and then we're going to have to pay a royalty to
Yeah.
Justin Moore.
Yeah, I kept it short. That's right. Yeah, so really excited to have Jay with us here today. For those of you who don't know, we'll get Jay to kind of give us his intro as to why we've invited him here, as he's got quite a impressive resume, somebody I admire quite a bit. But in the meantime, before we get into that, I just want to invite everybody to hop into the chat, share where you're coming in from. There's a few faces I recognize in here already. And so share where you're watching from, and also feel free to share a link to your newsletter or share a link to your Twitter or LinkedIn if you want to connect that way. There's definitely going to be people here who might want to connect with you. So please feel free to do that. A few other quick housekeeping things I want to mention too is we're going to be here for about an hour, and this is an open session. So the whole point of this is to bring on an expert like Jay, who's been very successful with his newsletter in particular. And we're going to talk about basically have you ask Jay questions mostly focused on newsletter monetization and how he's kind of driving revenue with his newsletter and those sorts of things. However, we can keep this somewhat open as well too. So if you have general questions about newsletters for Jay, myself, doesn't necessarily have to be about monetization. Please feel free to ask those as well. I'll pin all the questions for us, and we'll kind of go through them in an orderly fashion as much as possible. So that should be all the housekeeping. Oh, also replays. Yes, there will be a replay sent to you after the event is over within 24 hours or so, depending on how quickly I can get it uploaded onto YouTube, and it will be available on YouTube as well on our YouTube channel. So I think that is all of the housekeeping out of the way. So like I said, start entering your questions now in the chat if you want. But in the meantime, we're going to have Jay kind of give us the lowdown on why he's here and kind of give us how you've gone from 0 to where you are now, Jay. The Coles Notes version, I suppose.
Sounds good. Hey guys, my name is Jay. I am the creator of Creator Science. It's very meta. You can call me a meta creator if you wish. But my business goes all the way back to 2017 when I first started my first newsletter. So email has been the backbone of Creator Science, which teaches you how to be a smarter professional creator. It goes all the way back more than 6 years now. And since then, we've also rolled out a podcast, a YouTube channel. So we're really multi-channel in terms of the content we create to help creators. There's going to be a lot of create for creators, back-to-back language throughout this conversation, I'm sure. But email has remained the absolute core of the business and drives the majority of revenue. And as I think about growth for the business, email is at the center of growth plans because email will continue to be the backbone of the business. And that's something I recommend to really any creator, is having email be a core part of your strategy. And we can dig into that here over the next hour. So I hope you use this opportunity to be a little bit selfish. Feel free to share as much context as you would like in the chat, so I can tailor this advice to you. But excited that you decided to spend time with us here today.
Yes, agreed. And I'll just already see a good comment about playing a drinking game. Don't play the drinking game with create words in this webinar. Yeah. So you might be a little bit too early to start drinking. So Jay, I think that's good context. And I know you didn't really mention specific financial numbers, but we could safely say that you're earning over 6 figures just in general with your business.
I'm an open book on this stuff.
Okay.
I think it's helpful to people for me to be as transparent as I'm comfortable, and I'm very comfortable being very transparent. So last year, the business generated about $340,000, and this year we're on pace to break $500,000. And again, email, big part of it. So happy to go into those corners, share as much as you guys are interested in.
Okay. So I want to start with kind of some fundamentals. how do you currently use your newsletter to drive revenue? And that might not be fundamental enough. I mean, we can even talk about just the basic for those people who maybe aren't quite as familiar with using a newsletter to drive revenue for a business. We can get
Sure.
into that, but maybe if you want to give us an overview on kind of how you are using your email newsletter to drive revenue for your business.
Well, to take even one more step back, I think it's helpful
Sure.
to share this frameworks for folks. If you're a creator, I use that as shorthand for content creator. If you create content, that's half the battle. The other battle is distributing that content so people can actually see it, consume it, learn from it, benefit from it. So when it comes to creating, publishing, distributing content, you have a lot of options as to where to do that. You have social media, you have email, you have podcasts, you have YouTube, you even have SEO in there. So when it comes to distribution, I think about platforms in two camps. You have what I call relationship platforms and discovery platforms. Discovery platforms, we'll start there. This is mostly social media. It's a platform where the platform itself is incentivized to get your content in front of people who have never seen it before, may not know of you. They typically have an algorithm at the center of how they determine who sees your content. And so those platforms are great for getting in front of new customers, audience, leads, things like that. On the other side of the spectrum, relationship platforms. This is what I refer to as owned distribution, because those platforms are a direct connection between you and your audience. There is no third party steering algorithmically whether people see your content or not. And there's only a few relationship platforms of note. Those are email, podcasting, SMS, and I even put private communities on that list. So for content creators, I recommend that you adopt a strategy that has one part relationship platform, because that future proofs your business. That helps you create owned distribution that you have control over. And then a little bit of effort on the discovery side as well, because the discovery platform is what drives people to your relationship platform. Let me give that in a little bit more depth. I started with email. I think it's just as viable to start with a social platform and bring email into it. But a very common approach is to say, I'm really great on Twitter. I'm still calling it Twitter. I feel like if I keep calling it Twitter and not X, then maybe it'll revert. I'm really good at Twitter. So I'm going to grow an audience there. And I'm going to try to siphon off as many people from that discovery platform to email, my relationship platform, as possible. Because if you start with email, the question is, well, how do I grow my email list? And thankfully, because of SparkLoop, because of ConvertKit, that is actually easier than ever with email alone, but it's still going to be faster if you grow on a discovery platform where you have some of that platform's built-in incentive and tools to discover new audience and drive them to email. And that's been my strategy for a long time. Really, over the last 18 months, I've put a lot more effort into that strategy. And for people that are getting started today, I wish I would have started different. I wish I would have started really hard on a discovery platform alongside my email, because for the first several years, I was really just doing email alone. And that works. It is helpful, but it's not as quick as if you combine it with a discovery strategy.
Yeah, I think they're very complementary, and one is going to just supercharge the other for growth too. So that is good context. We have a few questions rolling in here. Let's see if I can get these in order here. So Giselle says, I have a social following of 30,000 and reach over 1 million a month. I'd like to learn how to get more of these into my paid newsletter. So the not so age-old question, but age-old question of paid newsletters is already coming into play. So that's I think that's an interesting place to start.
Yeah. Well, congrats, Giselle. That sounds like fantastic progress already. I love paid newsletters as a part of your revenue model. So that's really cool that you're doing that. There is, of course, the direct path where you say, I'm great on social. I'm getting in front of a lot of people. I'm just going to make it more consistently apparent that I have a paid newsletter and that will result in some level of conversion. I would play a little bit of a longer game, even if it introduces a secondary step, which is to say, I want to get people from social to a free newsletter and then upsell them the paid newsletter from the free newsletter. Because typically the difference between a free newsletter and a paid newsletter is fairly minimal in terms of the reader experience. So if you get people to try out a free newsletter, that's a lower ask to change from your social media discovery platform experience to email. And then if they like the free email, then you say, by the way, if you want more of this or an expanded version or, you know, however you describe your paid newsletter, here's where to do it. Because that's also building up an asset of a email-based audience that you can communicate with anytime that you want. I think it's good for everybody to have a free email list. And so my strategy would be social media to the email list, upsell the email list to the paid version of that. Hopefully that makes sense. And in terms of getting people from social media to a free email list, which I think is probably relevant to a lot of folks here, you have to ask yourself, put yourself in the shoes of the viewer of your social content, of your discovery platform content, and say, what would be compelling to make them trade their email for this? You might be able to say like, hey, every week I send an email newsletter on Sundays. It helps you become a smarter creator. Some people say, okay, I like Jay. I trust him. I'll sign up for that. You might want to instead say, hey, I put together 60 of the hardware and software tools that I use in my business. If you want to know exactly the gear that I use to achieve this look of my studio, to run my business, go to creatorscience.com/toolbox. You can get that list of gear for free. That might be more compelling because it's more clear what I'm getting in that transaction. And that's a real example, by the way. If you do like this look, you can go to creatorscience.com/toolbox and see all the tools that I use. That's called a lead magnet. What I just shared with you, something that makes people compelled to share their email address with you because it feels like a clear transaction of value. And now you have the ability to communicate with them for as long as they continue to allow you to communicate with them. They can, of course, unsubscribe at any time, but hopefully your content is good enough in email that they don't wish to do that.
Yeah, I agree. Great shameless plug too with the live version of that toolbox. It's good because I think a lot of people, the term lead magnet can be polarizing. I think I've seen a lot of debate over whether or not people should use them for newsletters or not, or if they should only be used for sort of the email marketing, maybe D2C sort of style of email. So I think there's a place for them definitely within newsletters if they're done properly. And so just going back to what you were saying about kind of this funnel that we have for, you know, an audience to a free subscriber down to a paid subscriber. I just released a article on a newsletter called Exploding Ideas on the SparkLoop blog last week. And it's exactly how this guy, Eric, who's running the newsletter, is doing it. He gets people into his newsletter through social traffic. It's a really high quality, high value, free newsletter. But then he offers a paid version to go even deeper, to give you more tactics, more ideas, and some more deeper research. So that's his way of basically using his free, I said in the article even, he uses his free newsletter as essentially almost a lead magnet for his paid. So I think that's a really good way to go about it because it's really hard to convert just a general audience into strictly right away into a paid newsletter subscriber. So I just shared that link.
If anybody said, oh, sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I just shared the link in the chat if anyone wants to check that article out. Go ahead.
I think there's something to be said about how clear the value of your ongoing newsletter is. Because a lot of people, when they get started in this game, they have a website. They might be a professional services provider, freelancing of some sort, or providing some sort of service. And they hear, I should start a newsletter. So they create an opt-in page on their services website and say, hey, subscribe to my newsletter. That's kind of it. You know, maybe it's like, get a weekly tips and tricks of yada, yada, yada. Mm-hmm. If it's not clear what I'm signing up for in that newsletter, what type of content I'm going to get in that newsletter, then it's going to be hard to get people to opt into that without more details or a lot of existing affinity for you. And if you're trying to grow an email list, chances are you want people to build affinity for you through email. So you don't want to have the friction of someone has to already know and like and trust me really well to sign up for my free email list. You want to offer something of value in your ongoing email that is clear and compelling, so that even if I barely know you, don't know if I like or trust you yet, I'm willing to give that a shot. So I think a really good email premise is a good lead magnet. Take Harry Dry of marketingexamples.com.
Yeah.
Even from the name, it's very clear what the premise of Marketing Examples is from the name of it, from the landing page. So he doesn't really need a lead magnet, because if you want examples of good marketing, you are going to sign up when you hear about marketingexamples.com. And I think that's kind of the bar to strive for, and say, I want to make my newsletter as clear and compelling as Marketing Examples.
Yeah, that's a really good example and a really good newsletter as well to check out too. Got another question here from Megan. Megan asks, she's curious on frequency, use of video, and opt-out recommendations. And I assume this means for obviously for a newsletter. And she says great content for B2B channel. So maybe with the premise of more of a B2B newsletter. So maybe your recommendations, Jay, on frequency, use of video, which we could touch on. Video in newsletters is something that isn't super common and also kind of tough to accomplish. And then opt-out recommendations.
I like the choice of language in saying frequency as opposed to consistency, because what I hear a lot of people say is, you got to be consistent with delivering this. And that is true, but people hear consistent and they think frequent. They think if I'm going to start an email newsletter, then it needs to be every week. That's just like the assumption people have, that I'm signing up to do this thing weekly. You can be consistent by promising a once monthly email newsletter. You can be consistent by promising a twice monthly email newsletter and doing that every two weeks. So really, like, the best answer, even though it's not like sexy or exact, is you should send as frequently as you're able to deliver value that people open and read and say, I'm glad I opened and read that. Some newsletters are daily and people like reading them daily. That's a hard bar. So you got to have some intellectual honesty about what is sustainable for you, that you can not only check the box of I published something and shipped it, but that is something that I feel good about and people are giving me good feedback on that they enjoyed. For me, that happens to be twice weekly. But really, it can be any frequency that is sustainable for you and people enjoy. I think over time, most people kind of increase frequency to be once a week, maybe a couple times a week, maybe every day. The everyday angle, you really have to be playing like almost a news angle.
Yeah.
Like really timely, really relevant, so that you never really run out of content, because you're constantly sharing like what is in the zeitgeist, what is happening right now. If you're not doing news, then probably every day won't make sense as a bar to strive for. You guys should also understand that the reason some newsletters are daily is typically because their business model is ad-based, and the way to increase ad revenue is to increase the amount of available ad inventory, and the increase ad inventory by sending more frequently.
Yeah.
If you're not playing that game now, or if you don't plan to play that game ever, then you're probably not playing a volume game. And that's okay. Most creators aren't playing that game. So, the short answer, again, you should publish as frequently as is sustainable for you to be consistent and deliver something of value that people enjoy opening and reading. If you see that, hey, I increase the frequency on what I'm sending, my open rates are going down, that's probably a signal that people either didn't want that frequency from you, or they're not enjoying the content enough to sustain that frequency.
Yeah, I think that's important to monitor as you go. Is obviously keep an eye on your analytics, but if you are changing things, you definitely want to keep an eye on how many people are still opening, if that's going up or down, or if your engagement rates with clicks and that sort of thing, or even replies, are going up or down too. And then in terms of use of video and opt-out recommendations, you can touch on these quickly if you want, Jay, but because you do a lot of video, you do YouTube, you've been doing YouTube for a year now. What is your thoughts on video in YouTube, or sorry, video in newsletters, and how you can manage that?
Well, one thing I do tell people is I want people to read my newsletter in my actual voice. And so, I'm a podcaster. Part of that's easy for me, but having video also helps people get a feel for who I am and can hear my voice. I think I do write in my voice, quote unquote. So once you do hear me speaking, it's easy for you to kind of hear my actual voice in your head. So one thing I recommend to a lot of folks is after somebody subscribes to your email, that's an excellent opportunity to share a welcome video with them, to kind of set the table, share what they can expect. That gives them a chance to feel your energy, your vibe, hear your voice, see how you move in space. I think that's excellent. Throughout the sending of the newsletter, I think it's just fine to use video if you're compelled to do it. I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I do think that video can be a relationship accelerant because asynchronous video is almost as close as you can get to real person-to-person interaction without being in person, right? You could, of course, have synchronous video like this. Dylan and I are talking live right now. You're with us. So this is probably a step above asynchronous video. But behind this would be asynchronous video, and behind that, maybe asynchronous audio or synchronous audio. So it can be a relationship accelerator, but it's not absolutely necessary. I would say it is a really good user experience to have that touch point after subscribing.
I think that's a good recommendation, and it's not a must-have, but it's a nice-to-have for sure for newsletters. So I'm just going to go back to the questions here. So
I have one more thought to add on that.
Oh, actually. Yes, please.
You're probably not going to achieve a 100% click rate. I preface with that to say, if you put a video in an email and the entirety of that email's purpose is to say, watch this video, there's going to be a significant portion of people, probably a majority of people, who won't actually watch that video. And so their experience with your email was not great. So that's one thing to be careful with. If you're saying like, I'm actually a video person, I want to introduce email, I don't want to think about writing, I'm just going to send an email every time there's a new video. If you don't have something of value in that email, besides saying, click on this video, it's going to be a bad reader experience for probably the majority of people. And you'll probably get unsubscribes, and that's not serving your email strategy. So that's something to think about. Even if you do want to introduce video to a lot of your emails, make sure that there is something that's consumable in the format of email alone that people will say, I'm glad I opened that email from Jay, from you.
Yeah, that makes sense too. That's a good point. Em asks a question about, they say, I am in the remote work industry. Do you think the VC crisis led to fewer business opportunities with brands? So I'm thinking this probably is in relation to ads and sponsorship opportunities for newsletters potentially. I'm just trying to type a link here, but
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, I think my sort of lack of clarity in the question is a signal that I don't think that this has led to fewer opportunities with brands or with businesses. I think if anything has led to fewer business opportunities with brands, it's simply the macroeconomic climate that has had some impact on sponsorship budgets generally, but that has nothing to do with a VC crisis. The VC crisis is probably also a symptom of that larger macroeconomic issue.
Good call. You're much more knowledgeable in that regard than I am. So thank you for answering that one. We got another question here. UD just asked, is SparkLoop different than ConvertKit? And yes, they are. ConvertKit has recently acquired SparkLoop, but even they exist kind of in separate silos, even though they are integrated. So SparkLoop can help you grow your newsletter with our tools. We can also help you earn money with your newsletter through our Upscribe recommendations. ConvertKit is an email service provider, so they're basically you build your email list in ConvertKit. You send your emails from ConvertKit. SparkLoop doesn't send emails on your behalf, with the reception to the referral programs, or we can send some automated emails for you. But they are different, yes. Andrew asked a question: do you recommend posting as a creator or as a brand? This is a good one. I'm building a newsletter but plan on growing it into a media company once the audience is big enough.
I am pulling up essay I wrote to answer this in depth. I'm going to put it in the chat right now, but I'll give you a little bit of a synopsis because there's a lot of nuance here to cover.
Yeah.
I think it really, really depends on what your intended outcome with the project is. Here's a couple things I believe to be true. If the from name is from a human name versus a brand, you will probably get more opens. It'll be easier to stand out and get more opens in the inbox. That's, of course, a broad stroke. It is overcomable. There are lots of people who excitedly open the Skim, the Hustle, Morning Brew, things like that that are named as a brand. What a brand does for you is really give you a lot of optionality in who is creating the content. It's a lot easier to build a team of writers when you are publishing as a brand. If you come out and if I was just writing as Jay Clouse, then it's going to be hard for me to authentically publish something that someone else wrote under my name and feel like I am really building relationships with my readers. So you really have to decide, what is my hope for this project? Is it something that I want to grow beyond myself? If so, it might make sense to post as the brand. I find it's also really useful and something that feels good to me to say I am the founder of Creator Science, because it's difficult when you're getting started to do things like jump into office hours with SparkLoop or go on a podcast and people be like, this is Jay Clouse. He sends the Jay Clouse newsletter. It just feels a little weird. So I like having a project name, even if it is still Jay Clouse, that sends the emails on behalf of that brand. But especially if you want to build a team around this of other content creators, going with the brand name is probably a good consideration. But I put the link in the chat for more nuanced consideration. It's just, nice. It's a nuanced, tough question. Both paths are viable. You really just want to think about what is the outcome and the long-term vision of this.
Awesome. We have a question from Andrew, potentially the same Andrew. What is the minimum ad spend budget should we begin with to start testing social ads to drive subscriber growth? And at what point does it make sense to add a referral program? So while we're talking about newsletter monetization in terms of driving revenue, this is more of the other end of the spectrum where we're spending money to grow our newsletter. Do you have any insights into ad spend budgets?
I will say, in this world, probably one of the best people for you to follow is Matthew McGarry. He has a newsletter called Newsletter Operator, newsletteroperator.com. But I've spoken to Matt and he's given me some insight here. And it seems like you should probably be prepared to spend about $1,500 per month on social ads if you want to see a good test and a good return on it, and to build a system to support this. His target for a lot of his clients is between the $3 to $5 per lead range. And really what he tries to get to is between $2 to $3. I think, of course, anything lower than that is good. But his goal is around $3 per lead. Last I spoke to him through social media, and he recommends about $1,500 minimum spend per month. At what point does it make sense to add a referral program? I think at any point, that's fine, because that's an organic growth strategy. Mm-hmm. So I think you could do that anytime, but you should think about it thoughtfully, because having a referral program does not mean that you'll automatically start getting referrals. You have to be thoughtful about how you build that referral program so it's something compelling that people actually want to refer. And Dylan, I'm sure you and the SparkLoop team are a better answer of this question than me. If you want to take a stab at it, you can.
Yeah,
Because I have some thoughts here, but how about you start with this?
Well, I was just going to say we have quite a few resources on our website at sparkloop.app where you can look at some ideas for rewards and some case studies as well on some successful referral programs that have been launched with Substack. One of the most successful, we'll mention him one more time, is Justin Moore, who has the Creator Wizard. I just drew like there, the Creator Wizard newsletter, and he has a 1-tier referral reward. So basically, like you have to refer one person, and you unlock a reward. So that's pretty powerful, and it's easy to do. Pretty much everybody can accomplish that. But I'm not going to get into too many specifics. I think the point is, like Jay said, is creating a referral program just for the sake of creating one isn't wise. It is really smart to think it through, look at what other people are doing, and really think about what people will want.
It used to be that having a referral program at all was a novel, interesting thing. Thanks to SparkLoop making this accessible and making it more widely available, having a program is no longer the novel, exciting thing. The rewards you offer have to be novel and exciting to get people to want to participate in the referral program. And from what I've seen, the best rewards to offer in something like this, it's not stickers or mugs or t-shirts or swag anymore. What it is something that is scarce or time bound. So, if you refer 1 subscriber, 2 subscribers, you get access to this thing that you can only get access to through this referral program. James Clear has an example of he'll give you an extra chapter of his book that's not included in the book. That's the only way you can get that chapter. So if you want that chapter, the only way you're getting it is through that referral program. It could be something like, I used to create and sell this workshop. I no longer sell that workshop. Now the only way you can get access to that workshop is by referring X number of people. It could be, hey, I'm doing a live session, masterclass, and office hours like this. The only way you get a ticket to that session, which is happening next month, is to refer a couple of people. You see how these things, they really push you to consider them differently, because the only way I'm getting these things is through the program.
Yep. Is a really good recommendation. Charlene asked, do you spend time segmenting your list so you have an idea of who your subscribers are?
I do.
Yeah.
And I think it's valuable, but I also am hesitant to really push people in this direction if they're just getting started, because this takes a little bit of work. Frankly, I am just now really digging into this, and I'm 6 years in. Of course, I wish I would have done it sooner. But if you're not sure how to do it, it can be challenging. Of course, with ConvertKit, you could use something like a link trigger to basically have someone say, hey, click here if you are an Instagram creator, and that applies an Instagram tag. And now I have a segment of Instagram creators. That's the easy way. It can be a little dangerous because some email clients click all the links on behalf of the viewer. So you might get some inaccurate clicks. I use a third-party tool called WriteMessage. And that's what the infrastructure I'm building to make this a little bit easier.
Yeah, I was going to say WriteMessage is a pretty solid way. I think did I cut out there?
No, you're good.
I'm good. A really useful way to segment, which I think you first introduced me to a while ago, back in the lab.
Yeah.
We answered that one. Okay. Do you repurpose your social media content into your newsletter, or is it completely different content from your social media strategy? I guess, what's the content strategy for a newsletter? It's a great question.
I would go the opposite direction. If you want to have some alignment between your newsletter and your social content, instead of turning your social content into a newsletter, I typically go the opposite direction. Now, it's it can be kind of cyclical too, because the great thing about social media is you can quickly test the resonance of certain ideas. So you might publish something on social media and get a strong signal that people were interested in that and say, okay, I'm going to expand on that. And that's going to become a newsletter in that way. But what I recommend for a lot of folks is to think about your writing in your newsletter as a growing body of work that is referenceable and shareable over time. And then from those longer form essays or writing in your newsletter, you can pull out some short form stuff for social media. Both of those things can be true. I typically tend to err on the side of planning for the writing, the long form writing first, and then repurposing that into social media.
And would you say that since you have, like you said, about 6 years of doing this, you kind of have you have some intuition about what's going to resonate with your readers more? Does that, so that you're not, I guess my question is basically like, you don't want to necessarily go down this rabbit hole of creating this long post that people aren't interested in or engage with. So how do you formulate the ideas for those longer posts? I guess is my question, instead of testing them first.
I think this is a good question. This is pushing me to go back in time, because right now, 6 years in, I understand my audience so well. I understand the different stages of where they're at, the problems at each stage. So I have a very large pool of things I can write about. Here's a quick tip for anybody listening. I recommend having a list or a database, if you use Notion, around problems that you discover your audience has. If you have a database of problems that your audience has, then you constantly have something to write to because they want to solve those problems. If same with like questions, if you keep hearing questions come up in your audience, capture those things. That's something that you can address in your content. So I'm trying to create like a canonical reference on creatorscience.com of all of the main problems and questions that somebody encounters on their journey as a creator. And so I have lots of long form ideas. If you are just getting started, you don't know your audience that well yet, then social media is a great testing ground to put things out there, see how it goes relative to other things you have published. And that might be something you can flesh out into a larger idea. But really, I try to start from a place of, what do I know about my audience? What do I know about their desired outcomes they're trying to get to? And what do I know about the problems on the journey to get there? If I can map out where is the earliest point my audience might be starting. And for me, that's saying, I just discovered that people are creating content and I'm considering trying to create content myself. That's like the earliest point someone is on their journey when they come to me. The outcome they want is on the furthest end of the spectrum, a content business that they are mostly removed from, and they have a team and systems, and they've scaled the content creation process. People will enter my world at all different points along that journey, and there are different problems all along that journey. My content is answering specific questions and problems all throughout that spectrum I just laid out. That's
Right.
a pretty wide spectrum with a lot of points of stopping. So if you think about your audience and where they're starting on the spectrum, where they might end on the spectrum, and say, I'm going to create content that helps them get through each point of that journey, that's going to give you a lot of ideas.
No kidding. Yeah, there's a lot there. Thanks for that, Jay. That's some good context to how you're running things. Leslie asked a question: what new revenue streams for newsletter creators are you most excited about? I'd love to hear your position on the direction of where ads are heading as well.
I am most excited about what I think of as direct monetization opportunities. Direct meaning it's between you and the consumer, and there's not a third party there. Indirect things are like advertising. There's not a problem with indirect things, but as we shared earlier, when there are macroeconomic challenges, then your indirect opportunities are the things that typically seem to dry up the fastest. So to build a durable, resilient creator business, I encourage people to really focus on direct monetization opportunities first. And so I look at things like digital products, because digital products are super scalable. And if you have a great digital product that people read and get something out of, or consume and get something out of, then you should be able to build basically an email machine that as subscribers grows, your revenue should also grow, because you want people to enter your email world, be nurtured to the point of being offered this digital product that can help them. And some number of people are going to take you up on that offer, and purchase. So direct revenue opportunities between you and your audience, digital products that really get excited about. I'm using intentionally kind of vague language because if you think about it in terms of categories like that, then there's a lot of opportunities. A lot of people will say like digital products are courses, right? And yes, courses are digital products, but there are also digital product opportunities that are not courses. There is a member of the lab, my membership community, named Patrick Sterling. He's predominantly a YouTuber, and he makes tutorials to teach people how to use DaVinci Resolve, which is a video editing software. His digital products are presets, meaning people download this pack of presets and they can upload that into DaVinci Resolve. And now a bunch of settings that Patrick has spent a lot of time learning and putting in place to achieve a certain look or outcome, that just populates in their account. They don't have to recreate it. They can just go with it. Templates for maybe a CRM and Notion. That's a digital product that scales infinitely. So I'm using the term digital products intentionally because it goes far beyond courses. Anything that you can make that as a digital asset that basically is infinitely scalable, that doesn't require any additional fulfillment on your part as a creator, that's what I get the most excited about.
Would you even include like an ebook or even actually a book in that?
Yep.
Anything that you can essentially download or get access to online.
Totally. And a book fits the bill as well, especially if it is like drop shipped or printed on demand, so that each incremental purchase, it may have a little bit of a higher incremental cost to you as a creator, but if there's not any work that you have to do to fulfill it, that's pretty exciting.
Is there actually, let's talk about this just a little bit about revenue streams, since it's a good topic. Well, it's the topic of the the chat we're having, but you also have the lab that you mentioned, your online community. You also have a podcast. You also have some affiliates, some digital products, and you have ads and sponsorships in your newsletter. Correct? So
Correct.
Could you give just the audience a rough idea of how, just even percentages of, I think you even posted this on Twitter somewhat recently, maybe not even percentages of your total revenue pie, but percentage of what your newsletter drives for your revenue for those various things?
Well, okay, if we talk about the different streams of revenue, like you said, we have memberships, we have digital products, we have some services, we have sponsorship, we have affiliates, and we have royalties. Email doesn't touch royalties, but everything else there, email touches.
Right.
And not even touches, but really drives the majority of. I would say email is about 50% of my sponsorship because some of that is podcast, a little bit of that is YouTube. Email drives the majority of members in my membership community. Email drives the majority of digital product sales. Email drives the majority of even service-based revenue because typically people book through like my hourly call link, which is in the footer of my email, and affiliates as well between email and maybe the essay itself on my website. That's email as well. So I would say really it's the majority. The only competing thing historically would be like Twitter, which is very spiky. Like sometimes I'll publish a digital product for the first time or do a pre-sale or something like that. I can get some momentum on Twitter for that thing, but there's not much like ongoing sales that come from Twitter. It's really in like the lead up campaign of it, and email's working all the time. So I would say it's at the top end, probably about 75% of my revenue I could attribute to email.
That's pretty good. And just for context too, for people who aren't familiar, the lab isn't a $99 a year membership, right? Your online community is significant in terms of dollars. So like what is your membership tier right now?
So at the lower, well, there's kind of a solo tier where you can get all of my digital content, and that's $6.99 per year. the full community membership is $19.99 per year, and then there's an upper tier with coaching as well. That's $29.99 per year.
Right, and it's not $29.99. That's 2,000.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So, and you're driving still a lot of those high ticket, I guess, purchases through email, and it's working.
Yeah, the majority. And,
Yeah.
Some of that is like active campaigning. Some of that is people have been reading my emails for years and they're just aware that this exists. Like, I don't do your typical launch model. A lot of people use email as this open closed door launch, which can be very, very effective. I just had someone on the podcast last week. His name is Kieran Drew. And in that episode of the podcast, we talk about how he had a $142,000 course launch almost entirely through email. And that's the way a lot of people use email to generate revenue. For me, a lot of my email strategy is just continuing to make clear that there are ways that I can help you that are paid opportunities.
Yeah.
And people kind of find their way there because they're already enjoying the free content that I'm putting in their inbox.
That is proven to be very successful for you. It's a good strategy. Rex asks, at what point in your newsletter growth did you begin monetizing? My partner and I have grown our newsletter to 6,000 subscribers in a month. Wow. But find that prospecting leads is difficult in the niche we are in, given that it's a B2B focused niche.
It's not a B2B focused niche, is what he said.
Sorry. It's not. Yes.
Well, I was monetizing within the first year. To give you some more context, newsletter started January of 2017. I wrote a daily newsletter for a year. I really started selling my first product, which was a mastermind program, a group coaching program, in June or July of 2017. So it was about in the first 6 months that I started monetizing through services, which I think is available to anybody. And if we fast forward to 2020, which is when I switched from MailChimp to ConvertKit. So after 3 years, I had 1,800 subscribers. And to that point, I was supporting myself through the group coaching program that was predominantly driven by email. So you don't need a ton of subscribers. You need to have alignment between the subscribers you have, or some of the subscribers you have, and the thing that you are selling. But it depends on how you're monetizing. If you're willing to monetize with your time through services, you can monetize pretty much immediately. If you're monetizing through a digital product, again, you can monetize as early as you would like. The answer I give here, and I wrote an article on this as well, classic. You can monetize as soon as you want to and are able to. If you have something for sale and there are people who would be willing to buy it, you can monetize now if you're willing to. The trade-off is that you give up a certain level of like social capital that you build over time. When people's relationship to you is, I subscribed and Jay just ships me free value constantly, that's awesome. And people start to tally up in their mind how much they appreciate you, how much you've given them, and how much they've given you. And if their balance of what they've given you is zero, then at some point they're going to be looking for ways to support you. And it can be good to keep that balance at zero for a long time until you feel really good about, this is the thing I want to launch. I want to make a big splash around it. I want to get a bunch of people to do it. The earlier you monetize, the fewer people that are going to be ready to take that next step in the relationship with you, which is fine, but it eats into that, mental ledger that people are keeping. But I think at the stage you are at, you can certainly monetize now. It just depends on how you do it. Sponsorship has different dynamics in terms of audience size. A lot of times, depending on the sponsor you're approaching, they might have minimums in terms of the subscribers they want you to have, or the opens that you're getting on an email. But there's always an opportunity to sell direct sponsorships to brands. We did this with a podcast I did a long time ago. It was a small podcast. We couldn't play the typical like CPM game in terms of, we have X thousands of listeners and you pay $30 per 1,000 listeners. We sold direct sponsorships where we went to sponsors who wanted to get in front of our exact audience, which we knew who they were and they were specific, and the value of that audience to that sponsor was really, really aligned. Typically, we were working with professional services organizations, accountants, executive recruitment, lawyers. So they didn't need a ton of conversion to get a really strong ROI on that investment. And
Right.
the same applies to email.
Yeah, I think that's important to note too, because I think even, for example, I was able to, within the first year of my newsletter, got my first ad with 600 subscribers. So like 10% of what you have. It wasn't breaking the bank. I think it was like a $30 ad placement, but it was something, right? And then I also sprinkled in some affiliate links in my newsletter too. So all those things slowly start to build up as you grow your newsletter. And it really depends on also how concentrated your audience is on the niche that you're talking about, right? If you have a super broad newsletter, then it's going to be harder probably to monetize it with ads in some ways, because you're not going to have those professional services like Jay was talking about, the that are looking to speak directly to your audience, because your audience could be this whole run a whole gamut of different types of people that may not need exactly one thing. So yeah, it's tough, but 6,000 subscribers in a month is pretty impressive. Let's go to one of our last questions here. Jay, thanks again for your time. We'll be wrapping up here in a few minutes, at the top of the hour, in about 5 minutes or so, but we got a couple questions here. Actually, it looks like just one left. So a question about platform. Jay, are you on Ghost? Are you going to move to Beehive? If not, why or why not? So we've kind of talked about ConvertKit a bit here, but I know you did have a Ghost for your website, I believe, about a year and a bit ago.
Yeah. So I have a unique setup here. If you go to creatorscience.com, that website is built on Ghost. A lot of people know Ghost as a newsletter platform because they do have that built in. A cool thing about Ghost is it's like a web builder that allows you to send a newsletter out of it. They even allow you to have paid memberships within the platform. All those features are good. I use Ghost not as a newsletter delivery tool, but simply as a CMS. Like I'm using it instead of WordPress or Webflow or Squarespace. I don't send emails out of Ghost. It's just where I host the long form essays that I write. I send emails out of ConvertKit and I link to the essay on Ghost. So I do not plan to move to Beehive. It's an impressive platform. I think they're building something great, but I am on ConvertKit. I think ConvertKit is more fully featured. I love ConvertKit, and so I'm going to stick there for my emails.
Awesome. I will second that with ConvertKit. Is there anything else that you wanted to share just about monetization, in terms of any other tidbits of advice that we haven't covered that you think are important?
Yeah, I think there are a lot more opportunities in monetization than maybe immediately apparent. Because people tend to get into ruts as to what they think are the monetization opportunities. They think it's sponsorship, they think it's courses. But just as I was saying, digital products as a container is much more broad than you think. I think there is always a creative way to monetize an audience that you have. I was listening to a podcast called Founders. I enjoyed that podcast. The host is David Senra. At the beginning of the episode, he advertises one of his paid products, which is a premium listener feed. And that's not completely new. There are lots of podcasts that have like a premium feed where they say this is ad free or yada, yada. But I thought his approach was interesting. It's basically a private AMA feed. So every episode of his free podcast is him talking about a book that he read and some of his takeaways from it. But you don't actually get a ton of direct engagement with him as the host in terms of him communicating directly with the audience and their questions or sharing many of his opinions. A lot of it is just like, these are the highlights I took in the book. Let me read through the highlights. So I thought that was interesting because that gives people who are super fans of the show a way to engage more deeply with him and even get his direct opinions and answers to questions that they have. So that was an interesting, unique, novel approach. And I encourage you to open your eyes and try to observe more of the revenue models you see around you, because people are probably doing more creative solutions for that than you immediately realize. Here's another interesting example. There's a tool called Thrivecart. They're a software company. They offer the product as a one-time purchase. You purchase the license one time, then you can use Thrivecart as much as you like. That always struck me as surprising because, wow, a one-time purchase. So they are servicing customers who are no longer paying them. That just seems to be a growing maintenance cost. What I came to find out about models like Thrivecarts is they negotiate with a payment processor on the back end, like Stripe. And so even though you're paying the same 2.9% plus 30-cent fee to Stripe for processing, a lot of times these platforms actually get a little bit of that processing fee back from Stripe. So there are creative revenue opportunities available to any business that go beyond what you're thinking. And if you're feeling stuck, I would work to talk with somebody where you can share more context about your business and try to find some creative opportunities that are aligned with the interests of your audience.
Awesome. That's great. Those are great examples. Thank you, Jay, for sharing those. I think that puts a nice bow on this office hours chat. So on behalf of SparkLoop and everybody here, I want to thank you, Jay, for hopping in and sharing your wisdom with us. I'm going to share quickly here just some links where you can find Jay. I know he's already shared a few things for his website, but I do want to make sure that we let people know where to find you. Jay I'll let you tell the people you're pretty around on X. Oh, I mean Twitter, or X. It's still called, the URL still says Twitter, so
I know.
We'll for now.
Those links are great. If you enjoyed this chat, sign up for the Creator Science newsletter, become a smarter creator. I hope you enjoy it.
Awesome. Cool, Jay. Thanks, everyone. Replay should be in your inbox within the next 24 hours, and we'll be on YouTube as well at the SparkLoop YouTube channel. So thanks, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Dylan.
Bye. No problem. Thanks, Jay.